Good afternoon, everyone. Let's make a start. It's too hot, isn't it? Let's get that out of the way, first of all. Ridiculous. An interesting week. So welcome to this week's live stream. If you haven't watched these before, the way it works is I normally do this every Friday, just as the US markets are opening, and they're just opening now. We've had that IT outage situation overnight, haven't we? Apparently caused by some CrowdStrike patch or something on Microsoft. There we go. So they have opened down. How much are they down? About $50. What's that? About 15% from last night's close. Interesting to see how that reacts today. But the way this works is we'll take a look at some of the major announcements that are due out next week. And then we'll have a look at the markets. We'll have a look at the major markets, the indices, commodities, bit of FX, all the usual. And if there's any stuff you want looking at, if you just put it in the chat, we'll take a look when we've looked at all of that. Okay, that's it. Let's get going. Let's get a risk warning done first. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread betting, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, that's that done. I did a webinar just over a month ago now on options, options trading, understanding options trading, the basics of options, why options are usually not good for trading directional trades, but are interesting for other sorts of strategies. I'm a big fan of trading options. I've been trading options off and on for about 15 years, and how to manage risk. If you'd like access to that webinar, for those of you who are in the WhatsApp group, if you haven't seen it, if you send me a message, I'll send you the link. If you would like to see that webinar, it's about 90 minutes long. Drop me an email, or not drop me an email. You need to join the WhatsApp group, and I'll give you details on how to join the WhatsApp group. So if you sign up for a month, I'll give you access to that webinar if you're interested in finding out more about options and how I use options. I think it's a great way of trading, but there's a bit more to it than just sort of buying and hoping. Anyway, let's get into next week. It is quite a busy week next week. On Wednesday, we've got a whole slew of data on Wednesday. We've got European, UK and US PMI data. So again, can be used as a bit of an indicator for inflation. So that's quite a big day on Wednesday. Then Thursday, we've got US GDP. So how well or not is the US economy doing? And then on Friday, we've got US personal consumption expenditure, which is apparently the Federal Reserve, the US central bank's preferred indicator for inflation. So that's always a big one. So a busy second half of the week, I think next week is what we've got. The WhatsApp group I run, I've been running it for 18 months now. There's 2 daily updates. There's an update from me in the morning of markets I'm watching, and an update more focused on US markets in the afternoon. Trades that I'm running, what trades have I got open, what am I looking at, stops and all that sort of stuff, and a Q&A. If there's any questions, people can fire them in throughout the day. You can sign up for just a month. Most people have been in there for longer than a month, so hopefully they think there's value there. If you'd like to try it out, go to my website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. I'm sure the link is in the description to the video. There we go. And if you go to the subscribe bit on the website, you can sign up for the WhatsApp group. It's 50 quid a month, but if you use the code YouTube, you get the first month for 40. And if you sign up, you get access to that options webinar, so you can try it out and see what you think. Okay. And also, the other thing I do, which is free, is what is it? It's the newsletter. So I send a newsletter out every weekend. Usually, if you're not on the newsletter list, if you go to the homepage of the website, home, put your thing in there, your email in there, and you'll be on the list and get that. And that's, again, what do I think looks interesting in the week ahead. stuff I've been trading, stuff I'm looking at, and a trading tip as well. So if you sign up for that, you'll get that. Okay, that's it. That's what the WhatsApp group snapshot looks like, a typical morning update for me with a mix of different markets. Otherwise, let's get into it. Let's take a look at what's going on. So it's been a really interesting week. We've seen the tech sector has been really heavily hit, and clearly that has played its part on indices. If we look at the Nasdaq, for example, we did see, this is in the out of hours market last Thursday, but we did see briefly all-time highs again, up at 20,800, and the market at the moment is more than 1,000 points lower. So it's dropped almost 5% since a week yesterday. Big old move. And this is where we are. We are, on the Nasdaq, it's been a dramatic fall, but we're only back to where it was at the beginning of this month. So not even 3 weeks ago is where the market's been knocked back to. But we've seen, plenty of these, some of the usual big tech names. Microsoft had been, a star performer. That's been knocked back about 7 or 8%. I think Google, I came out of a Google trade this week. I've been in it for a while, but that's been knocked back a bit from 193 down to about 178. So again, decent sized move. I don't know what the likes of Nvidia have done. I didn't really look at that this week, but let's have a look at that. Yeah, they've been knocked back as well. So everything's been under a little bit of pressure this week. But let's go back to our usual start and start things off looking at indices, seeing how things are. So this is the S&P. So, the trend in the S&P, the latest bit of the trend, has been up since October 2022. So if we pick up on that, off those lows, it looks something like that, and then it accelerated from October last year. We have seen some great gains for stock markets since then. So in the great scheme of things, it's still in the trend. Nothing has changed, and it was only earlier this week, Tuesday, we did see a fresh all-time high on the S&P. So for me now, I am still very much buy the dip on the S&P. When the dip stops dipping, it's a strategy I've done for as long as I can remember, and the market's a bull market still, so the trend is still up, so I'm still a buyer. I think some levels to watch this afternoon, if we take a look at it, I think the lows from yesterday, it traded down to 55, almost 55.20 yesterday in the last hour of trading. Let's see what happens down there. It also coincides with the old highs from up here. So 55.20, 5500. If I was a buyer today, trying to catch the falling knife, I would want my stop below there at the moment. But it has been, a fairly brutal sell-off. But the trend is still up. So for me, let's bring that back. There we go. So for me, it's only if we start losing 5400 does it start to look as if this trend is in trouble, and those are only the mid-June lows. So it's definitely been a volatile few days. But personally, I'm not thinking we're gonna fall off a cliff just yet. Famous last words. So it makes for an interesting week next week though as well. So my expectation is for the market to start recovering at some point. Let's see how today ends and how things trade into next week. Nasdaq, same story on the Nasdaq. So the Nasdaq, there's the trend on the Nasdaq going back to pretty much the beginning of 2023. Here we are. We've got a bit of a level to watch on the Nasdaq. If you flip it over to the hourlies, there we go. Those lows from the third week of June, around 19,475 on the Nasdaq 100. That's interesting. About just under 300 points lower than where we are now. So I think if we saw this market under pressure today, that's quite an interesting area to watch. It has been a big old slide, but again, we have had these on the Nasdaq. We maybe haven't had a one-day move like we had on Wednesday for some time. But what did it do back here? Back in March, it went from 18.5 down to 17. So it dropped 1,500 points back then. And we have had this market that's just sort of pushed its way higher for the last 3 months with very little in the way of sell-offs along the way. So I think it's always a bit of a shock, and we perhaps get lulled a bit into a false sense of security when markets are just steadily plodding higher, and then when a sell-off can be a bit feels like it comes out of the blue, and perhaps people think it's the end of the world. I don't think it is just yet. The Dow has been interesting. I mean, the Dow carried on merrily higher until yesterday. It set a new fresh all-time high yesterday. The Dow, of course, very different mix to the S&P and the Nasdaq. So perhaps more of a defensive mix-up for the Dow. So not as vulnerable to these tech sell-offs that we've seen. But again, the trend in the Dow very much up there. So that's it. For US markets, yes, it's been a volatile week. It's been an interesting week, but it hasn't changed the trend for me. So I am still buy the dips on US markets. The Russell, the smaller cap index, that had a bit of a run as well. After being fairly sideways for a long time, we saw that break out to its best levels since end of 2021 this week. That's an interesting one for next week. I think we're seeing it hit a bit over the last couple of days. Again, if I thought this was a valid breakout, I'd be buying the dip there. Let's see what happens. Moving to other markets, the Japanese, the Nikkei broke out to fresh all-time highs last week, and then got caught up a bit in the general US stock mayhem this week, in the last few days. I think this is another interesting market, going into next week. This is one where the trend has been up again since 2023 on this bit of the chart. Broke out. If I was looking to buy the breakout at the moment, I'd want my stop at probably below 38,000. So that's another interesting one for me next week to see where this dip stops, assuming it is going to stop. Where's the dip going to stop? And perhaps be a buyer there. But that was a bullish move last week on the Nikkei. The DAX, the German index, this has been interesting, perhaps more on the hourly chart. I was looking at this morning, and I mentioned it in the WhatsApp group. I have traded the DAX a bit over the last couple of weeks. I think I've done a couple of trades, and I've done okay. But for me, the DAX is interesting because going back to June, so going back just over a month, we do have a gradual recovery in the DAX. Loads of swings, big swings, like 18,800 near enough at the highs, and almost 18,000 on the downside. So some big swings. But I thought it was interesting. We saw it sell off heavily this morning. But the bottom of the recent range is around 18,000, 18,050. So I did wonder if perhaps not today, but perhaps next week, is there a buying opportunity in the DAX when we're going to see it have another recovery from where it is now. So I thought that was pretty interesting for next week from a more short or medium term point of view. Let's see how that works out. The FTSE, it's just a bit boring for me, the FTSE. But there we go. That's the last 6 weeks or so on the FTSE. 8100 has been support. We're at the bottom of the range again. Maybe we get a bit of a bounce higher in the FTSE there. You can see it on the daily. I mean, the trend is up on the FTSE. It just hasn't done much for about 2 months, So, but interesting to see if these old lows continue to hold. And finally on stocks, the Hang Seng. I think this is an interesting one. I've been watching this for some time now, and because I want to be a buyer, because I wonder, are we seeing for the Hong Kong Hang Seng this big downtrend reversing itself? Is that what's going on this year? And if it is, then is this the new trend? So I think this is an interesting market. So I've been waiting to buy the dip, but it dips, it rallies, and then it dips a little bit lower again. But maybe the opportunity in that will come up in the next week or so. So at the moment, if I was a buyer of the Hang Seng looking for a more medium-term trade, I'd want my stop the other side of 16,000, and just to see if this market can stage something of a recovery. But interesting to watch, I thought. Okay, so stocks overall, plenty going on. I'm expecting the bounce. It's been a volatile week. I won't be doing anything today. Once I've done this live stream today, I'll do an update for the WhatsApp group, and then I'm pretty much finished. I'm going to let the dust settle and see where everything is. But I think it should make for an interesting week next week from Monday. Let's take a look at some other markets. Dollar index. Dollar index took a bit of a clobbering this week. Was it this week? Last week. Thursday, and has just sort of drifted its way lower this week. I did say yesterday, I wondered, it's been in this sideways range, the dollar index, since the beginning of April, with about 103.90 on the downside. It broke through it on Wednesday, and I did mention in the WhatsApp group, I wondered if this was a false break. If it's a false break, then the aggressive trade is to be a buyer with a tight stop. So far, it has proved to be that, but let's see what happens next week. We've had a bit of a bounce back. It hasn't, though, yet taken out the highs from Tuesday. So if you thought this bounce in the dollar index was just a dead cat bounce, then selling it up here with stops above, 104.60 or something, is an interesting trade. So interesting to see how that performs next week. But overall, pretty sideways. Let's see. Let's see what happens with that. And of course, with the dollar being sideways, it means lots of other FX markets perhaps don't look the most interesting either. Pound against the dollar did hit a 1-year high this week, continuing higher, but with the dollar coming back a bit the last couple of days, that's eased back. I mean, that's perhaps another interesting market next week. You can see I'd highlighted this level for me for my own trading on the chart. The lows from last Thursday, around 129. The market has dropped 150 points into those lows. So again, if you really wanted to buy the pound from a short-term trade, then for me, I'd have my stop at least the other side of 129. So interesting to see what happens with all of that. Bitcoin, what's that been doing? Let's have a look on the dailies. Again, a bit volatile, but still sideways overall, false breaks down here through 56.5, and we've seen the market recover from there, but at the moment it's slap bang in the middle of the range, so nothing too exciting for me on Bitcoin at the moment. Right, other stuff. Gold. I think gold's interesting. So gold, I did a video on gold this week. I'm going to try and start doing videos again on the channel. I'm going to be a bit less lazy is my summer resolution. So I did a video on gold this week. I thought it was interesting. We saw gold. Let's tidy things up. Let's get all this stuff off. We did see gold on Tuesday and Wednesday, push out to fresh all-time highs, right? Up, how far did it get? About 24.86, 85, something like that. And of course, a move to all-time highs is traditionally considered a bullish move. But we did have it back here as well, back in May, move to all-time highs, and then the market just dumped like 150 points or so. Is this going to be any different? So far, it is just pulling back after the breakout. But again, I think it's interesting, gold, going into next week because, absolutely the trend, the shorter term trend, resulting in that move to all-time highs has been up since the end of June. And one of the things, again, going back to my update this morning in the WhatsApp group, I wondered about this level, 23.90. The lows on the way up. So a low, the market had sold off and we saw, the rally then, $100 rally to all-time highs. So I think that 23.90 level is interesting. So again, if I was a buyer of gold, that would be, I'd have my stop the other side of that. Maybe a bit more, give things a bit more leeway. Is down around 23.50, the other side of that. But interesting to see what happens with gold after this move to all-time highs that we had this week. So, but again, very dollar dependent, of course. If the dollar continues to recover, that is going to keep the pressure on gold. So dollar index clearly has a big impact here on what happens with the pound and with gold. Silver, I'm going to guess, is a bit boring. So look at silver. I mean, again, it's another interesting one. There's an obvious big level on silver, $28.60. What was that low there? End of June, 28.57. So let's call it 28.50 on silver. It has been a floor for the price of silver towards the end of June. Is it going to be the case again? Let's see. Again, of course, very dollar dependent, that one. Oil. I did a trade on oil this week, and I think I put my stop too tight. I got stopped out down here, and I think I should have had a wider stop. But anyway, it's all been a bit sideways since then. But overall, let's tidy things up again. Let's take some of this stuff off. we have had, since December, an uptrend in oil. It's sold off. It's gone up again. And it's sort of stalled. So it has. I was wondering earlier this week, end of last week, whether we get another bounce back up to have a look at 88. And it hasn't happened yet. And it is all, you could argue, looking at that now over the last 12 months, it's a bit sideways, isn't it? We've got the highs in at 95, the lows in about 70, and at 82, we're pretty much stuck in the middle of the range on the daily chart. So, yeah, perhaps not the most exciting. But going into next week, we've got lows at $80.50. Let's see what happens. But I'm after buying it last week, thinking it was going to go up, getting stopped out, and it then really not doing much at all. I'm a bit on the fence about oil, to be honest, because based on that bigger picture, it is all a bit choppy and sideways. Natural gas, the old favourite. I mean, again, it's been a brutal sell-off. This trend has just continued lower from natural gas. If we go back to the 11th of June, that was the high at 302, and it traded down to 2 earlier this week, briefly below 2 by the looks of it. So it's dropped 30%. Natural gas, the trend is still down. We had a little bit of a blip higher yesterday, but all the way down in natural gas, whenever we've had the blip higher, the sellers have come back out. So for me, it's still a bit too early to call a bottom. Perhaps this 2 level does end up being a short-term base for now, because it's a bit of a psychological level. So perhaps that ends up being something of a base. Let's see what happens next week. But yeah, no interest for me in that at the moment. But if people have been short all the way down, absolutely well done on that trade. Absolutely great trend. So for me, going into next week, lots to watch. Big focus, as ever, is US stocks. What happens? Are we going to get the bounce back? I think yes, we are going to get the bounce back, but it remains to be seen. So some levels to watch on the Nasdaq and the S&P and the Dow as well, of course. I mean, that's had a good run over the last month or so. So yeah, on the S&P, 5,500 is a bit of a level. On the Nasdaq, these old lows, 19,475 are the ones I'm watching. The Japanese market, after breaking out to all-time highs, has been pulling back. Is there a buy the dip opportunity there? And the German market, the DAX, are we going to see 18,000 or thereabouts end up again being the turning point for the DAX? Let's see what happens. And then the other one is the dollar index and the impact that has on so many other markets. So let's see what happens then. And that's it. Let's have a quick look at CrowdStrike, see how they're doing today. Would you buy the dip? Is the market overreacting to CrowdStrike's update, wiping out the world's IT infrastructure? It opened lower, so it opened at 295. Here we are at 313. So, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? What would be... Oh, should we do a trade? I haven't done a trade for ages, have we? Hold on a second. I've dug out my old YouTube trading thing. There's a trade in here. My old YouTube trading platform. There's a trade in here from... I can't even remember doing that trade. We must have done it on a live stream. But I wonder, do we buy CrowdStrike? If you want to find out why I trade with this company, if you go, I think the link is in the description down below. If you join via my link, you'll get access to webinars and stuff like that. I think it's I can never remember what it is. I'm not very good at this whole marketing thing, am I? I think it's bit.ly/David Trade, and it should be in the link. But anyway, let's do a trade on. Should we do a trade on CrowdStrike? We'll take the view. All right, they've crashed the world, but what's a morning crash between friends? It's fine. So should we buy CrowdStrike? The trend had been up on CrowdStrike. Got a stop at. I mean, they got the lows at 272. Let's be a buyer with a stop at 260. All right, that's the trades. How much should we risk? I don't know how much money I've got in this account, but let's do the trade. So 260 stop. I don't really want to risk $5,500 on CrowdStrike. Let's do the usual. Is it normally about 100 quid, isn't it? Risk on the trades. Oh, I don't think I've got enough. I've not got enough margin. 260. I think because of what's been going on, perhaps the margin levels have been upped from what they usually are on CrowdStrike. So perhaps let's not do that trade. I think the margin levels are perhaps a bit through the roof, considering what's happened. But I would be a buyer. So I'd be a buyer now at 313, stop at 270. Let's see if it claws its way back up into the mid 300s during the summer. But an interesting move there. So like I say, if you'd like to join the WhatsApp group, go to the website, use the code YouTube. You get 20% off the first month. I give you access to that options trading webinar. I do training courses. Details are on the website. 5-star Trustpilot reviews. You can have a look at those. And the free of charge stuff is the newsletter. So if you're not signed up for that, sign up for that. Right, let's have a look at some of the stuff you want looking at. There's only a few coming in. Nike. What do you think about Nike? Let's have a look. Nike on the New York Stock Exchange. It's really bombed out, isn't it? Look at that. So Nike is trading at a 4-year plus low. So it won't surprise you. Look at that. They had a shock on earnings, didn't they? So the earnings were out end of June. So they closed at 94 and they opened the next day at 77. Wow, big hit, 20% hit on earnings. And they've continued to sell off. So for me, I'd be looking for short opportunities rather than anything else at the moment. I mean, we have these COVID lows on Nike around $60. It might be interesting to see what happens down there. But, you know, considering the market we've been in for most stocks or for a lot of stocks, Nike is a massive underperformer. So I would not be a buyer. I'd be looking to sell. But for me, there's not an obvious level really. Maybe have a stop above 80, but I'd rather sell a rally. But I think it looks pretty weak still to me. So let's see. What do you think of VF Corporation? VF Corp. Is this German? VF Corp. It's listed on the German market anyway. Oh, it's another one, another downtrend, isn't it? So I mean, it's had a big swing, hasn't it? The last couple of months or so, from below 10 to 14. And I hate stocks that are that volatile, but I'd be going short. Is my quick answer, I think, because the trend has been down. You know, we had a big swing back here, November 23, from 12 up to 18, 19 euros. I'm guessing it is. I would be tempted to go short, and I would put my stop at least above there, at least above 16.5 euros. So I treat this as just like a dead cat bounce. What was the news? Okay, they had an upgrade or something, or whatever. So yeah, that's what I would do. I'd be looking to sell short VF Corp. I've been trying to catch the falling knife on Anglo American, AAL. I've got those in my pension, and I keep thinking I've got to sell them because they had that takeover stuff, didn't they? And I did, but I bought them about in here for the dividends, thinking that maybe they're going to bounce off that trend, and they didn't. And then they had a bit of a flurry of excitement when, was it BHP, Billiton? Who was it? Someone came in for a bid, didn't they? And Anglo said, no thanks. And I thought, I'm going to hang on because maybe there's another bid coming, but there hasn't been another bid coming. So, yeah. So for me, I probably should sell them, really. I'll do it. I'll still have time to do it. Well, let's see. I'd be waiting to buy, but they're still dipping, aren't they? So for me, I'd be a bit more patient, and I would want my stop below £16 pounds sterling with the lows from December. See what happens with those. So it's still drifty to me. So I would, I'd be looking to, maybe I should hang on to them. I'd be looking to buy the dip, but I'd still be waiting. I've got British American Tobacco as well. Good divvy payer, not so much a good share price thing. Oh, they've had a bit of a run, haven't they? But they're looking maybe a bit vulnerable up here. Anyway, yeah, so that's an interesting one to watch, but let's see. Dollar yen from Kevin in some Tenerife, Kev. I wonder if it's warmer over there than it is over here today. It's too hot here. Very British thing to say, isn't it? Too hot. What is it? Dollar yen. I can't even see it. There we go. Oh, I would buy that. Maybe not today. I'd definitely buy that going into next week, though. So dollar yen, we had that move in dollar yen. So it hit a high of, what did it hit? Nearly 162. It's traded down to 155. I would buy it. but okay, it's fallen out that trend line, but it hasn't, for me, it hasn't broken any major lows. So for me, that would look like a buy to me. And for the fans of the old oscillator squiggles, it's oversold, isn't it? It's been very oversold, and the last time it was oversold was back here in March. So if I was a buyer, I'd have my stop at least the other side of 154.50, if not another one of these levels. But I think that's an interesting one. I don't look at that enough, dollar yen, you know. That is an interesting one going into next week, I think. So for me, looking for the bounce. Let's see if we get the bounce on that next week. But I would treat that somewhat dramatic sell-off as a bit of a buying opportunity. VF Corp on the Nasdaq. It's not coming up. Is it not coming up for me on the Nasdaq? Don't know. I'm getting loads of other companies, but not VF on the Nasdaq. Oh, there it is. No, that's Nvidia. Is it V space F? Yes, it is. There we go. And NYSE. I'd sell that as well. It's the same company, isn't it? I think it's the same company. VF Corp. Yeah, I think it's just a different listing. I mean, it's still in a downtrend, isn't it? For me, anyway. So I'd be a seller, and the closest I'd have my stop is the other side of 18, if not higher. BAMNB. BAMNB. What is that? Can't even pronounce that. Not going to try. All right. Oh, nice chart. Whatever they do. Whatever BAMNB do, the market likes it. So some interesting moves, isn't there? They got earnings 25th of July next week. It's quite volatile, isn't it? So where's this listed? I can't. Is it listed in euros? So for me, you know, the trend is up. So I'd be a buyer. But where would you put your stop? So for me, the closest I would put my stop is the other side of 377. But you could arguably have it wider. But the trend is up though, isn't it? You know, it has turned things around a bit over the last few years. So yeah, I'd be a buyer. I'd rather buy a deeper dip perhaps. But yeah. Oh, AAL, American Airline. What? AAL is Anglo-American. What are you talking about? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. CVNA. Carvana. Haven't they done really well? Isn't it a bit like Kazoo, who have not done very well? And I think they've gone now, haven't they, Kazoo? Yeah, so they got... It's interesting, isn't it? That I think it's online car sales, isn't it? I think. So understandably did well during the pandemic, and then all these companies absolutely cratered afterwards. But Carvana, I mean, what a run. You know, if you bought Carvana April 23, you've made, 15 times your money? I mean, that is incredible, isn't it? So the trend is up. I'd be a buyer. The only question is, would I be a buyer now? If I was a buyer now, the closest I'd have my stop is the other side of 120. I'd probably rather have it the other side of $100. But yeah, that has been such a cracking performer, hasn't it? But for me, the trend is up, so I'd be a buyer of that thing. So yeah, nice. And FedEx. I bought FedEx. This was my fluky trade from June. I bought FedEx on the day of earnings without actually realising it was earnings. And they jumped about, what did they jump? About 15% after earnings. Obviously I did it because I am a great trader and I knew that was going to happen. It was not my ignorance of the earnings. So I'm still in the trades, basically. I'm still in that trade for FedEx. It's been a really good one for me. And I bought because it come back to the trend line, blah, 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 support, blah, 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 all the usual. It's tricky now, though, isn't it? What would you do now? I'm still in the trade. I've got a trading stop, so I'll see what happens. I'd still look to buy the dip. Perhaps the closest I would want my stop is the other side of that, the low after the earnings. So the other side of 284 will be the closest I have my stop. I do struggle, with stocks that have an explosive move like this. If you're in it, it's great, but if you're not in it, it's hard. I always feel like I'm chasing the market a bit. But no, I'm in the trade on FedEx. Interesting to see what happens next week. 280. If I was a buyer of the dip, and I'd have to be a buyer because the trend is up, the closest I want my stop is the other side of that low after their earnings came out. So that's that. American Airlines. That's what we're doing, aren't we? American Airlines. Oh no, not for me. I suppose you could take the view. Well, no, you couldn't. I was going to say, it's breaking below the lows. It's on new lows for the year, isn't it, American? So it's not one for me. I mean, there are these lows again, the COVID lows or later than COVID lows, whatever they are, down here, down at $8. But yeah, no interest for me. Again, I'd much rather sell short than be a buyer because of the trend. AMD, I'm sure these are on my list. Yeah, these are on my list of should I buy them trades. So I've done a lot of US stock trades this year. I think I've done about 100 US stock trades this year, and I've still got about, hang on, I'll tell you now, look on the other screen, 49 of them still open. So a big thing for me is has been US stock trading this year. And this is on my list of should I be a buyer, AMD. So for me, the trend has been up since October, blah, 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 into March, sold off, and it's all a bit sideways since then, isn't it? But if I was a buyer now, I'd still rather be a buyer than a seller. The closest I'd have my stop would be the other side of 140-ish. Those lows from early May. So I think that's maybe an interesting one. So that's what I would do on that one. Shopify. We have looked at this in the past, haven't we? I did a trade on this last year, I think, in the live stream. Well, I'd be a buyer. I'd be a buyer because the trend is up. It gapped lower on the earnings in May. I think that's quite an interesting trade, actually. Should we buy it? Should we see if we can buy that? So put a stop at 56, maybe. Hang on a second. Let's have a think. 45, 56. Yeah, I think that's interesting, isn't it? The trend has been up. It's come back down. Really, I should probably have my stop the other side of 45, but that's perhaps a bit too wide. So maybe 50 stop. What's that? It's still a 20% stop, isn't it? Maybe that's the trade. Should we try and do that with a 50 stop? To see if this trend continues. And I do need to top up my margin. So if I go with a 50 stop, 50. What's my risk there? 136 quid. Okay, should we do? And let's try and make it more around 100, so I know what I'm doing. There we go. 100. Yeah, it's 95 quid. All right, I'm going to buy Shopify. Blah blah blah. 50 stop. Go. Oh, it's too small. I'm trading too small. Oh, okay, fair enough. What's 0.1 risk? Okay, 135. Okay, bang, done. Right, so we bought that. Let's see how that one works out. We'll come back to that. We'll start building up some more trades during these live streams. Yeah, but I think that's interesting. Let's see what happens there. If that trend continues and we get a run back up. Of course, if markets completely dump, I'd expect Shopify and the rest to be dragged down with it. But let's see. Let's see how it all works from there. What is that tool for where you draw these lines? This is TradingView, if this thing, if that's what you mean. What's your medium-term opinion about cybersecurity sector? I got no opinion at all. Couldn't even tell you a company that was in the cybersecurity sector. So there you go. That's my opinion on that. If there was an index we could look at, like a cybersecurity index, I'd have a view on that. What's that? There's a German thing. Oh, here we go. There's a NASDAQ cybersecurity index. Let's have a look at that. There we go. I mean, it's underperformed the market, the wider market this year, isn't it? It had a great run, but then so did everything else. You know, from early last year. I don't know. If you thought it was a bit toppy, the cybersecurity index, you could go short with a stop above the old high, whatever that old high is. So yeah, but yeah, looks a bit boring to me, to be honest. I'm sure it isn't, but not one for me. McDonald's, Mackie D, McDonald's Corporation. It's interesting that it's been a bit sideways, isn't it, for a while. But these lows at 245 have sort of held again. So again, it's probably not a stock I would trade because I want to try and find stuff that's in a trend. But you could take the view: is the downtrend ending? Are we going to have another push up to the 280s? If I was doing that, I'd have a stop the other side of 240. It's just a little bit sideways overall for me. That one. Snowflake. Oh no. I mean, again, it's not one for me. It's a bit sideways. It's a bit crazy as well, isn't it? It's halved off the highs. If I thought there was going to be a recovery from here, it's the old lows from June 22. So 2-year lows down at 110. So I'd have a stop the other side of 110 is what I would do. So yeah, but not one for me because it's all a bit down, isn't it? So that's it. If there's no more questions, we'll wrap it up there. Interesting. What are these markets doing? They've calmed down a little bit, haven't they? So the Nasdaq, that's the S&P, marking a bit of time. Interesting to see if we get a bit of recovery. Nasdaq again, a little bit chop, not really going anywhere. Dollar index again, it's all paused. Maybe we get a quiet afternoon after the meltdown of all the world's technology this morning. Gold is still holding above that low. So lots to watch. And, like I say, go to the website to find out more about stuff. Yeah, if you want to... Oh, dear me. What's going on? It's all broken. If you want to find out more about the company I did the trades with, if you go to bit.ly/DavidTrade. The reason I trade with them, I like trading with them. Tight spreads, relatively small size you can trade. It's integrated with TradingView. I need to figure that out, how that works. I'm going to do that next week. I'll have a look at that in a bit more detail. But I trade with them. I use them particularly for my S&P short-term trading because it's a tight spread. But go there and find out a bit more. Otherwise, we're all done, aren't we? So have a good weekend. Go to the website to find out more. Do the WhatsApp group and you get access to that option seminar, and let us see where these crazy markets are this time next week. So until then, good luck with your trading. Thanks for coming.